They say in Harpswell Harbor, the mail always comes on time. Unless Earl Jennings delivers it. That warning came before I even saw the ocean, slipped across the motel counter with my room key, spoken like a superstition you don't joke about. Most folks treat rumors like smoke. I treat them like the fire you can't see yet. Harpswell Harbor looked sweet as a postcard, clapboard houses braced against Atlantic winds, a row of skiffs nodding at their ropes, salted air that stuck to your cuffs. The lighthouse pulsed out on the point, slow, patient, like a metronome for the whole town. Pretty, sure. But pretty is what rot wears to church. Claire Whitmore beat me to Main Street. She was fresh to the job, not to trouble. Former reporter, the kind who never learned to blink first. Beige trench, hair pinned back, notepad ready, eyes taking inventory of the world. She didn't ask if I was sure about taking the case. She asked where to start. Start with the name, I said. Earl Jennings. We'd been hired off the books by the town council to look at postal irregularities. Misplaced packages. Letters opened and resealed. Envelopes with no return address that carried nothing but a blank page. It didn't sound like much, the kind of nuisance people blame on interns and holidays, except every path curved back to the same pair of boots on the same walking route. We found those boots halfway down Main, pacing the curb in steady beats. Tall man, all wire and tight stiffened muscle, canvas bag drooped from one shoulder. Earl walked like he didn't trust the ground to stay where he'd left it. He wasn't young, wasn't old, just weathered, the way a pier gets weathered, still standing, somehow. Mr. Jennings, I called. He stopped. Didn't turn. When he did, his eyes clicked past me to Claire, measured, not warm. And the lady? He asked. Claire Whitmore, she said, hand offered, jaw set. He let the hand hang there, then looked back to me like we were skipping the greeting chapter. We're asking about a package, I said. Hardware store. Heavy. Unmarked. Delivered yesterday, gone an hour later. Don't remember it, he said, easy as breathing. Brown paper, Claire added. Tied with string. He blinked once. Just once. But the jaw tightened a millimeter, and my ears knew what a millimeter can mean. You mind if we walk your route? I asked. Sidewalks public, he said, and moved on. We watched him finish 2 deliveries, bills for a barber, a stack of glossy flyers for a diner nobody visits after Labor Day. No rush, no chatter. He set mail down like he was putting stones on graves. Back in the office above the bait shop, the floorboards complained under every step. My desk smelled like old rope and older coffee. Claire leaned against the window, fog ghosting along the glass. He's hiding something, she said. Everyone's hiding something, I said. I'm wondering if his something writes warnings in red wax. She frowned. Wax? Council brief mentioned seals. Old-fashioned. Not something you buy by accident. Afternoon slid to evening, and the harbor put its lamps on. The fog rolled in thick, erasing corners, turning the street below into a soft white river. I stayed at the window, a habit I never learned to quit. When you've lived long enough with danger, you learn its silhouette. I saw one then. Earl, moving under the lamppost with a different bag, not the sun-beat canvas, but something darker, compact, and heavy enough to tug his shoulder down. He didn't check doors, didn't slip envelopes. He kept to the center, turned toward the docks, and folded into the fog like a man walking into the sea. I could have followed. I didn't. The first night in a new town is a good night to learn how its shadows behave. Morning came with gulls and gossip. The buzz started at the bakery and reached the barbershop by 9. Retired librarian on Beach Street, Mrs. Kitteridge, found asleep in her chair. No break-in. No theft. No harm. But on the coffee table, a thick cream envelope sealed with deep red wax, the stamp clean as a coin. Claire and I arrived to the smell of lemon cleaner and old paper. Mrs. Kitteridge wore a cardigan that remembered other winters and a look that didn't love being the center of attention. "I don't nap in that chair," she told us, more offended than frightened. "And I lock my doors. Always." "Find anything else unusual?" Claire asked gently. The old woman nodded toward the table. The envelope had been opened with a butter knife, the wax lay in one perfect coin beside it. Inside, a single black and white photograph, thick stock, soft corners, the kind of print that remembers darkrooms and late nights. I lifted it with 2 fingers. The sea behind me was restless and dark, the pier rails framed my shoulders. The man in the picture, the subject, the target, the oddity, was me. "I've never seen that man," Mrs. Kitteridge said, peering over. "But now I guess I have." "Where did the envelope come from?" I asked. "I made tea at 10, she said. Read 2 chapters. Went to bed. There was nothing on the table when I turned off the lamp. And in the morning? It was there. Like a breakfast place setting. No noise in the night. Not even the fridge grumbling. I turned the photo. No note. No date. No fingerprints I could see, though I've learned not to trust what light refuses to show. Outside, the fog was thinning, but the mystery wasn't. We walked past the post office, and there he was, Earl, leaning against a rail with a tin cup, eyes on the street, face unreadable as tidewater. "Morning," I said. He lifted the cup in a nod. Claire held up the envelope. "You deliver this?" He looked. "Not long." "Don't think so." "Red wax," I said. "Old style." "Some people like old style," he answered. "Says they're serious." "You serious, Earl?" He smiled with half his mouth. "About the mail." He set the cup down, stepped inside the post office, and left the door swinging slow behind him. Claire drew a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "He's either clean," she said, "or he enjoys playing with matches next to dry wood." "Both can be true," I said. We walked the block, looked at locks that weren't scratched and windows that weren't forced. The town felt like it was listening. Back upstairs, I set the photograph in the center of my desk. Claire stood over my shoulder, the lighthouse's pulse sliding across her face every 12 seconds. "You ever pose on that pier?" she asked. "Not for a camera," I said. "So who took it?" "That," I told her, "is the second question." She waited. "And the first?" "Why deliver it to a librarian," I said, "if the message is meant for me?" I didn't say the rest out loud, but it sat there between us anyway, heavy as that dark bag in the fog. Whoever sent it knew where I was going to be, before I did. And outside, down on Main, the mail route carried on. Envelopes slid through brass mouths. Boots marked time on old boards. Somewhere, red wax cooled. And the quiet little town with the pretty view kept its secrets behind politely painted doors, counting down to whatever came next. The photograph lay on my desk like it had something to say but didn't trust the room enough to speak. Claire stood beside me, her arms folded, eyes locked on it. "This isn't just creepy," she said. "It's precise. Someone had to get close to take it. Close enough for you to notice. But you don't remember it happening." I didn't answer. I was turning the print over, half hoping for a note, a smudge, anything. But the back was clean, just that faint chemical scent of old photography. We walked back to Mrs. Kitteridge's to retrace steps. Her house was quiet, filled with the smell of tea and old books. Nothing looked disturbed. Not a scratch on the locks, not a window out of place. Whoever delivered that envelope didn't break in, they let themselves in. That meant 2 things. They had access. And they weren't afraid of being seen. Outside, the fog was thinning, but my gut told me the real cover in this town wasn't weather, it was routine. People notice strangers, but they don't notice the people they see every day. A man in a mailman's jacket could walk into any yard, up any porch, and no one would ask a thing. Which is why our next stop was the post office. Earl wasn't there. The only person behind the counter was Howard, the clerk, a thin man with round glasses and the kind of face that looked like it belonged behind glass too. "Looking for Jennings," I said. "Out en route," Howard replied, his voice careful. "How well do you know him?" Claire asked. Howard shifted his gaze to the ledger in front of him. "Well enough. He's been here longer than I have. Knows the town better than most." "Better than he should?" I asked. He hesitated just long enough to answer without words. Then he said, "You'd have to ask him that." Back on Main Street, we spotted Earl leaning against the rail outside a cafe, tin cup in hand, watching the street like he was timing its heartbeat. Claire stepped toward him, holding up the envelope. "You deliver this?" she asked. He glanced at it, then back at her. "Don't think so." "It was sealed with red wax," I said. "Old style. Not common these days." "Some folks like to make an impression," Earl replied, sipping his coffee. "You strike me as the type who leaves an impression," I said. He gave a slow smile, the kind that shows nothing but teeth. "Only on people who look for one." He walked away before I could press further, the kind of retreat that isn't rushed but is final. We started checking along his route. The first few houses were uneventful, bills, flyers, a holiday catalog or two. Then, at a pale blue house near the harbor, a young woman opened the door with a puzzled look. "Did you get anything unusual in the mail lately?" Claire asked. The woman frowned, then ducked inside. She returned holding an envelope, cream-colored, red wax seal, no return address. "Mind if we open it?" I asked. She nodded, and I broke the seal. Inside was a single slip of paper with neat, slanted handwriting. "He doesn't belong here." No name. No explanation. The woman swore she didn't know who it referred to. But the way her eyes darted toward the street told me she had an idea, and she wasn't about to share it with two outsiders. We left her porch, and Claire's voice was low. "Harry, these aren't threats. They're messages. And they're specific. Someone is targeting certain people. And letting them know they're being watched," I added. We reached the end of the block, and that's when I saw him. Earl, standing half a street away, leaning on a lamppost, watching us. He wasn't smiling this time. By the time we got back to the office, the day's light was folding into itself, the harbor slipping into that blue hour when shapes blur and shadows grow long. I locked the door out of habit, though in my experience, a lock only keeps out the polite. Claire was at the desk, sorting the envelopes we'd collected, when it happened. A sound in the hallway, soft, deliberate steps. The kind that know where they're going. They stopped right outside our door. And then, without a knock, a white envelope slid underneath. It was thick. Cream-colored. Sealed with red wax. I picked it up, the weight familiar now. Opened it slowly. Inside was another photograph. Not of me. Not of Claire. It was Earl. Standing at the edge of the pier, his back to the camera. Behind him, deep in the mist, barely visible, was a second figure, tall, still, watching him. Claire leaned in. "So either he's the one doing this. Or he's just another name on the list," I said. On the back of the photograph, faint pencil marks formed the date. Tomorrow. Small towns have rules. Unwritten ones. One of them is, you can't follow a man without him knowing. Earl Jennings knew. That next morning, Claire and I parked across from the post office. Earl was inside, sorting letters at the counter, moving slow and deliberate. His hands were steady, but there was something about the way he handled each envelope, like he was weighing more than paper. Claire sipped her coffee. If he's involved, he's not afraid of us watching him. Or he wants us to, I said. When Earl finally stepped outside, we gave him a head start. He walked his route like clockwork, a few houses on Main, a side street, then toward the harbor district. It wasn't long before he turned onto a narrow lane most people would miss. At the end of it was a chain-link fence, the kind that's meant to keep honest people out. Earl unlocked it, slipped inside, and disappeared behind a small shed. We didn't follow right away. Instead, we cut through a patch of pine trees at the back of the lot. Through the branches, I could see rows of old metal mail crates stacked against the shed. Most were empty. But one was sealed with red wax. Claire leaned forward for a better look. The pine needles crunched under her boot. Earl's head turned toward us, not quick, just precise, like he'd been expecting that sound. You know, detective, his voice carried across the yard, calm as the tide. People in this town don't like being followed. We stepped out from behind the trees. Making unusual deliveries, Earl, I said. Care to explain the red wax? He smirked. Some letters aren't meant for everyone. And some people aren't meant for this town. Before I could press him, a horn blared from the harbor, long and low. Earl slung a smaller, darker bag over his shoulder, locked the gate, and walked away without another word. Claire exhaled. That wasn't a denial. No, I said, it was an invitation. That evening, we didn't go home. Instead, we set up near the docks, keeping a low profile in the shadow of a bait shack. The lighthouse beam swept the harbor in slow, lazy arcs. Every time it passed, I caught flashes of movement along the pier, fishermen packing up for the night, gulls fighting over scraps, the occasional shadow that lingered a little too long. It was close to midnight when Earl appeared. Same dark bag. Same steady pace. He walked the length of the pier, the wood groaning under his boots. At the far end, where the light barely reached, he set the bag down. From the mist, a second figure emerged. Tall, still, face hidden in shadow. They didn't greet each other. Didn't speak. They just stood there, the bag between them like a silent exchange. Claire's hand tightened on my arm. Should we move? Not yet. Then, without touching the bag, the figure turned and walked away, swallowed by the fog. Earl stayed a moment longer, then picked the bag back up and started down the pier toward us. He passed within 20 feet. Didn't glance our way. His eyes were somewhere far off, like he was carrying more than the weight of that bag. When he was gone, we moved to the end of the pier. The boards were slick with mist. There was no sign of the second figure. But in the spot where they'd stood, something caught the light, a scrap of cream-colored paper, wet at the edges. Claire picked it up. The writing was smudged, but 2 words were still clear. Not safe. We stood there in the cold, the sea slapping gently against the pylons. Somewhere behind us, the lighthouse blinked again, counting time we didn't have. The bag was heavier than it looked. I could feel the pull in my shoulder as we carried it back to the office, the damp canvas cold against my coat. Claire kept glancing over her shoulder, scanning the quiet street. Harpswell Harbor was asleep, or at least pretending to be. We locked the door and set the bag on the desk. The room smelled faintly of salt and the faint, metallic tang of wet rope from the bait shop downstairs. I eased the clasp open. Inside were 2 things. A stack of envelopes, tied neatly with twine. And a small black notebook. Claire untied the stack. Each envelope was cream-colored, sealed with that deep red wax we'd been chasing for days. The names written on them weren't local, at least not all of them. Some were from across the state. A few were from other parts of the country. Harry, she said quietly, this isn't just about this town. I opened the notebook. The handwriting was small, deliberate, and every line carried a date, a name, and sometimes a short note. Most were simple, leave now. Too late. Already gone. Claire leaned in, flipping to a random page. It's a log, she murmured. Deliveries. Warnings. I turned the first page and froze. There was my name. No address. Just a date. Today. Before I could say anything, a sound echoed from the street below, the faint tap-tap-tap of footsteps on wet pavement. Slow. Unhurried. We moved to the window. The fog had returned, curling through the lamplight. And there, at the far end of the street, stood a figure. Not Earl. Taller. Broader. Too far to make out the face. The figure raised a hand in a slow wave. Then it turned and walked away, disappearing into the mist. Claire's voice was barely above a whisper. Harry, whoever's doing this, they know where we are. The next morning, we decided to go straight to Earl. If he wasn't behind the warnings, he knew who was. We found him at the edge of the marina, mending a torn mail sack. He looked up as we approached, his expression unreadable. You've been in my bag, he said. Not a question. You've been delivering more than letters, I replied. Care to explain? He took his time, setting the needle down, folding the fabric over. Some people need to know when it's time to leave. Before something happens. And who decides that? Claire asked. Earl's gaze drifted past us, out toward the water. Not me. I just carry the messages. Messages from who? I pressed. He didn't answer. Instead, he nodded toward the pier. If you want to meet the one who writes them, be there tonight. End of the pier. Midnight. We waited in the cold until the lighthouse beam began to fade into the mist. At exactly midnight, Earl appeared. He wasn't carrying the dark bag this time, just his usual battered canvas one. He walked to the end of the pier, then stepped aside. From the shadows, a second figure emerged. Tall. Still. Face hidden beneath the brim of a hat. They didn't come closer. They didn't need to. The air around them felt heavier. The figure reached into their coat and pulled out an envelope. Without a word, they placed it on the railing, the red wax glinting faintly in the light. Then they turned and walked back into the fog, vanishing without a sound. Claire picked up the envelope. Her hands were steady, but her breathing wasn't. Inside was a single line, written in that same neat, slanted hand. You're already on the list. The pier at night is a strange place. Every sound feels louder. Every shadow seems longer. The creak of old planks. The slow slap of water against the pylons. And out in the darkness, the lighthouse blinking its patient warning, steady, unhurried, like it knows the ending to a story you haven't read yet. Claire and I were the only two people in sight. At least, that's how it seemed. She pulled her coat tighter, the wind pulling strands of hair across her face. Harry, I don't like this, she whispered. That's good, I told her. Means you've got instincts. We were here because Earl had told us to come. Asterisk midnight. End of the pier. Asterisk the way he'd said it wasn't an offer, it was a sentence. He'd called it a chance to meet the one who writes the messages. I'd been to enough such meetings to know, sometimes the invitation is the trap. The fog was thick, rolling low over the boards, curling around our boots. Out in the water, buoys groaned against their chains, the sound carrying in the stillness. We waited. Minutes passed. The cold started to settle into my bones, and I could feel Claire shifting her weight to keep warm. Then, without warning, a shadow began to take shape in the mist. Tall. Still. A hat with a wide brim. The faint outline of a long coat. The figure moved at a steady pace toward us, never breaking stride, never speeding up. When they were close enough, I saw the glint of water drops clinging to the fabric, the way the fog beaded and rolled off. They stopped 6 feet away. No greeting. No explanation. Just the sound of the harbor breathing around us. Claire spoke first, her voice low. "You're the one sending the envelopes?" The figure didn't answer right away. Then a hand, pale, steady, reached inside the coat and drew out an envelope. Cream-colored. Heavy stock. The deep red wax seal unbroken. They placed it gently on the railing between us. I didn't pick it up. "Who's on the list?" I asked. The figure tilted their head slightly, as if weighing the value of an answer. Finally, a voice came, low, deliberate, each word placed like a chess piece. "Everyone who needs to be." "And what happens to them?" Claire asked. A pause. "Depends," the voice said. "Some leave. Some don't." I stepped forward, closing the distance by a single board's width. "Why me? Why my name in that notebook?" The answer came without hesitation. "Because you're here." That didn't sit right. "That's not an answer." The figure turned, beginning to walk back into the fog. Over their shoulder came the reply, "Yes, it is." In a few steps, they were gone, the mist swallowing them whole. I finally picked up the envelope. The wax was still warm. Back in the office, we locked the door before opening it. The light above my desk cast a sharp white circle across the wood as I slid the blade under the flap. Inside was a single photograph. It showed the harbor. But it wasn't the harbor we knew. No boats. No people. The pier empty. The water black and still. And the lighthouse, dark, like its eye had finally closed. Claire leaned over my shoulder, her breath slow. "Harry, when was this taken?" "No way to tell," I said. "Could be yesterday. Could be tomorrow." I flipped it over. On the back, 2 words in that same neat, slanted script we'd seen before. "Soon." We stared at it for a long time, neither of us speaking. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator downstairs in the bait shop. Finally, Claire said, "So, what now? Do we leave? Stay? Try to get ahead of it?" I set the photo down, leaned back in my chair. "We watch. We listen. And we wait for whoever's writing this story to make their next move." She frowned. "And if we're still on the list?" I looked at the drawer where the black notebook was locked away. "We probably are." The fog outside pressed against the windows like it was trying to get in. Somewhere down on Main Street, I could just make out the slow, steady tap-tap of boots on wet pavement. I went to the window, but saw nothing. Just the lamplight pooling in the mist, glowing soft and cold. Claire stood by the desk, staring at the photograph. "Harry, you think the harbor in this picture is supposed to be a warning?" I didn't answer. Because deep down, I already knew the answer. Some messages are meant to be read. Some are meant to be understood. And some are just there to let you know that someone is watching. And in Harpswell Harbor, the quietest town I'd ever been in, someone was definitely watching. The last delivery hadn't been made yet.